am Dr. Sadhana Jackson, and thank you so much for coming to this session. We are so excited to meet with you and so excited to talk to you all about how to use your voice. So just an introduction for me, I am Dr. Sadhana Jackson. I am a pediatric neuro-oncologist, which is a long word for a brain cancer doctor for children. So I see and care for patients at the National Institutes of Health. It's NIH for short, and it's in Bethesda, Maryland. And I have the awesome job to not only take care of patients who have brain tumors, children specifically, but I also lead research having to do with brain cancer research. I have a small lab at the NIH, and I really like to be able to answer questions around how best can we improve therapies for children with brain cancer. So in addition to my full long training experience of being a doctor and being a cancer doctor specifically, along the way, I developed cancer. I developed thyroid cancer. I had surgery, I had radioactive iodine, I had to get rehab, I had to get steroid cream put to my neck so I wouldn't have an ugly scar. And that was a very humbling experience. I was towards the end of my training is when I got diagnosed and treated. So it was very humbling and very enriching experience, very sad, very depressing experience, very grateful when I got repeat scans to show that I had no longer had cancer. So in addition to being a cancer doctor, looking at cancer cells under the microscope, caring for children who have cancer, sometimes caring for adults who have cancer, to then be diagnosed with cancer. And what I didn't state in my bio is that I am also helping my mother right now, who was recently diagnosed with recurrent breast cancer. It's metastatic. So I am also a caregiver. And so I have had all of the roles, hold all of the roles in the whole aspect of cancer. And I hate cancer, you guys. It is the worst. So if there's a question around cancer, I very much probably know it and have experienced it personally, or as a caregiver are experiencing it currently. So I'm happy to be on this panel to talk about using our voice. And I'm very passionate about everything around cancer. And I still think it sucks. So I've said everything that I need to say about me so far. And so next I'm going to kick it to Tricia.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Jackson and Grit Health for the opportunity to be here today. I am Tricia Hernandez, the Senior Manager of Community Engagement at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And in that role, I work through our online social platform for patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals to connect with patients and caregivers every day, listen to the challenges, celebrations, and concerns they have, and help provide them with education and resource information to help support them throughout their cancer journey. I also have worked with underserved communities my entire career. My entire career has been after finishing a clinical psychology master's degree in nonprofit work. And I have been working with underserved communities throughout that career. And I continue to be able to do so at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society as well. I'm also an 18-year Hodgkin's lymphoma survivor, and that certainly shifted my direction in life and the choices I made. Cancer made a big difference to me. Now being at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is not just a personal experience for me, it is the passion that drives my desire to help the organization with its mission. Personally, after surviving cancer, went on and continued my nonprofit work and was lucky enough a few years after finishing chemotherapy and radiation to give birth to my post-cancer miracle baby. And that miracle baby is now 14 years old. And so we're experiencing parenting a teenager right now. But thank you for the opportunity. And I look forward to spending the afternoon with everyone.
Thank you, Tricia. And Susan?
Thanks, Dr. Jackson, and thanks to Dave and Nicole and Lauren and everyone at Grit Health for allowing us to be here today. I'm honored to be part of this panel. And my role is with Powtown Development Foundation. I'm the executive director. Our goal is to develop online health communities, peer-to-peer health communities to support various disease states. And our flagship community is Town, which serves over 5,300, 5,400 now patients and caregivers all over the world that are dealing with colorectal cancer, and dealing with them at every stage from stage 1 all the way through, and supporting caregivers as well, and every possible facet of the disease journey. We have over 120 specific neighborhoods for everything involved in colorectal cancer. And I came to Town as a caregiver, and Angie and Dr. C knew this from the other night when we did our introductions, but I was taking care of my daughter Jessica, and I always have to show her picture because I'm a proud mom. She was 16, had just turned 17 when she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and no family history, no risk factors. And of course, the immediate question is, how did this happen and why did this happen? And there were really no good answers coming from our clinicians and care team. As wonderful as they were, we were dealing with some of the best minds in oncology. And unfortunately, this is a growing trend. That's why that you see the age just being lowered now to 45 for national screening for colorectal cancer, because almost half of all colon cancers are happening under the age of 45. So that is a shocking statistic. And, and dealing with my daughter, her journey was 17 months from diagnosis to when she passed. I know that we need more answers. And so immediately as a parent, I jumped into, to research, and, pretty much lived on PubMed 24/7, and started asking a lot of questions, and eventually realized that what Jessica and almost everyone else in this cohort were being told was that her cancer was environmental. And that's what everyone else in that age group, for the most part, unless they had Lynch syndrome, was being told about their colorectal cancer. So that really put me on a path to find out what environmental and epigenetic factors might have influenced her cancer. And quickly we found out from her care team at Georgetown that there were specific chemicals that they know are affecting the microbiome. These are, in many cases, chemicals that are banned in Europe, but not here. And in many cases, they're chemicals that we don't even know are in our food and our personal care products, things that we use every day. And so that just put me on this really deep dive into research. And I ended up speaking at the Early Onset Conference to over 1,000 clinicians and researchers about some of those factors. And I've been pursuing that ever since, and actually was asked to present the research to the National Institute of Environmental Studies under NIH. So I'm still on that research. So that's my nutshell. And I'm honored to be with all of y'all today.
Thank you so much, Susan. Angie?
Hello, hi, my name is Angie Giallourakis, and it is an honor to be here with this wonderful group of people. I thank Grit Health, and of course, Dr. Jackson, thank you for being here to moderate this conversation. I am a mother of a 4-time cancer survivor. My son, Stephen, is now 30, but he was diagnosed when he was 15 with stage 4 osteosarcoma. He had a tumor, softball-sized tumor in his L4 of his spine, and had about 40 metastatic cells in his lungs. Thankfully, he made it through that. However, a year and a half later, he developed secondary AML and had a bone marrow transplant, and successfully, I must say. He does have chronic pain management issues, and also suffered from PTSD, which wasn't identified immediately. But after spending much time reading about cancer survivorship and chronic pain and the impact that that has on the person and particularly, younger people who are still developing and are becoming, have lost out on socialization, their friends have moved on, and these are not uncommon things I'm telling you about. So I started a foundation, a nonprofit in 2009 called the Stephen G. AYA Cancer Research Fund. And I did that because I wanted to make sure that I got the word out that young people were getting cancer. And I also wanted to get the word out that there wasn't enough research. And at that time in 2009, organizations like Stupid Cancer were on the, getting out there, and other groups, Live Strong, but there wasn't a lot. So I really felt compelled to learn as much as possible. I'm a former college professor. I'm a former rehab counselor. So I know that if you get the stakeholders involved, that's when change takes place. So I reached out to the community that I knew, as well as started attending conferences, and then going to Washington, DC, and speaking to my legislators about the need for better funding for the NIH, the National Cancer Institute, making sure that we did a better job of finding better ways to cure and treat cancer. Today, my son is, as I said earlier, a 4-time survivor. This past year, he had a couple scares with tumors, but fortunately they were removed and he's doing okay. Today, I'm also a parent mentor for 3 different organizations that provide services. And also because I learned about wellness in trying to help my son and doing research on nutrition, integrative health, I started to do yoga myself, and I'm a yoga for cancer teacher. I also teach meditation to the AYAs in our community with the Stephen G. Foundation and the Elephants in Tea magazine, hence my background for you, my lights in my closet. And it's just getting the word out to everyone and to be a support, because that's my skill set. And we all have different skill sets, and I think that as we look to use our voices to either help others, to make change, we need to look at ourselves and say, what is it that I can do? What am I good at? Well, I found out that I'm better at one-on-one. I'm better at working closely with people and, letting them know that we're there for them. Other people are good at research and understanding and dissecting research and explaining it. So I guess that's my message for right now, and I look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angie. And Minas?
Thanks so much for the invitation to be here today. I really appreciate everyone's efforts, hard work to put this great panel together. It's really exceptionally important to be talking about this and patients finding their voices in their own treatment planning and decision making. I'm just a doc who's interested in shared decision making. I'm a breast cancer reconstruction surgeon specifically. My practice is PRMA in San Antonio, Texas. I've been very, very lucky. I have a phenomenal team. I practice my passion. But after many years of doing this, and you don't have anything to prove to yourself anymore, and don't have anything to prove to others, and then your practice kind of develops, and I started realizing that there was more that I could do. I was touching about 300 women in terms of breast cancer treatment per year, and there are 300,000 women diagnosed with breast cancer every year. So that, together with the recurring theme that I saw in terms of complaints from my patients, which were things like, had I known then what I know now, I would have chosen something different, or I wish I had known this, or why did no one tell me, or why did no one ask me if this was important? Anyway, that introduced me to the concept of shared decision making, which isn't really a new concept. It's been around since the 1980s, but now it's kind of developed a renewed following and interest. Patient advocacy is significantly kind of on the up. People are talking about it, and people are realizing for many reasons, which hopefully we'll touch on today, why their voice is important and how to get their voice across. So my skill set, as Angie brought up, is really in the decision aid arena. Because of shared decision making, I'm trying to create patient-centered, evidence-based shared decision making tools for patients that they can then use to find their voice and make sure that they have the conversation that they want to have with their treatment team. So that's me. That's my nutshell. Looking forward to talking about a bunch of stuff with you all.
Thank you so much. We have such a rich panel today. I'm excited to hear these answers. So one of the first questions that we have is, what does it mean to use your voice, and why is that so important? So I can give just a small little tidbit. Because I'm a doctor, all my friends and all my family will contact me about small and big issues. And so if it happens to be that there's a cancer, that there's a question about cancer or diagnosis is there, I always will reiterate to them, it's important to get a second opinion. And if you get that second opinion and you agree or you feel more connected to that second or third doctor that you come in contact, go with your gut. So I think that's a way that we can use our voice and kind of make steps around the voice, both the inner voice and outer voice of just support system. But Minas, can you talk about what it means to use your voice and why is it important?
Sorry. Well, as a physician, there's an immense opportunity, I think, for us to learn from our patients. Sometimes there is only one treatment, but that's not usually the case. Most of the time, there are options, there are things that can be adjusted, and the patient's preference is really, really important in that decision-making process because, as physicians, we focus on the now priority, on the cure, but it's the patient who's left with the consequences of the decision-making. And so it's important for them to feel that they have skin in the game, right? I mean, it's their body, it's their illness that they're dealing with. And so we have to really listen to anything that they feel is important in terms of what's going on in their lives. And feeling comfortable is crucial because we know from shared decision-making data from publications, we know that when people are involved in their treatment planning, they just do better. Their outcomes are better and they're much higher satisfaction, generally speaking. So second opinions are crucial as well. I think as a physician, we all need to be open to patients having second opinions because that can be that, we can't be insecure about it. We have to welcome it and we have to encourage it because it can really also confirm that the recommendations are exactly what's best for that patient.
Thank you so much. Tricia, can you comment on this? Why is it so important to use your voice and what does it mean to use your voice?
Well, I'm going to start with the second question first, because I think that sometimes it's hard to understand that there are many voices, right? Many utilizations of voices. Sometimes when the word advocacy comes up, people immediately go to legislative advocacy, which is incredibly important because it really moves things forward as far as access to care and support for patients. But there are many other ways to use your voice, and that can be from, like Minas was saying, related to treatment choice and understanding what you're going through, all the way through a cancer journey to maybe working with organizations to share your story in a way that's meaningful and relays the mission of the organization. So I think there's a lot of ways to do that. I love hearing Minas talk about the involvement of patients from the get-go on questions, discomfort, all of those pieces. And I know both of you address that as how you practice. My personal patient experience was much different 18 years ago. I definitely felt like an other. I didn't know that I had any choices and felt intimidated, not by my treatment team, which are amazing. I'm alive today and I'm grateful every day to them. But I don't remember anyone asking me, hey, how are you doing, right now? How are you experiencing all of this? And I have very distinct memories of going into treatment day one for chemotherapy and already having an incredible level of anxiety about all of that. And my pre-authorization wasn't completed. And so I got there, got my blood work drawn, actually had the needle because I didn't have a port, put into my arm to receive my chemotherapy, and sat for almost 2 hours with that in my arm without receiving the chemotherapy. And that was because the pre-authorization wasn't done. And I, again, felt intimidated about saying, hey, I've been sitting here and I'm very uncomfortable and this needle is in my arm. So those kinds of experiences can shape fears that patients have about advocating for themselves, about sharing how they're feeling, about asking tough questions, about getting second opinions. So I think it's really important that patients, and now, with that experience under my belt and the ability to work through LLS with patients and caregivers, I am every day recommending information, questions to ask, things to write down, people to take with you, all of those things when you feel like you can't advocate for yourself, or if you don't know how, to give them the resources to empower them to do that, because it's key. So I love hearing physicians that are doing that, because that was not my experience. So I'm grateful that that is the experience that your patients are having.
Thank you, Tricia. And for Susan and Angie, we'll start with Angie first. The parents in this great panel, in thinking about how important it is for people to use their voice, or patients to use their voice, what do you feel are some barriers as to why people aren't comfortable coming forward, or the reason for not? Angie, you can start first.
Sure. I think I think part of it is, just one's personality. I have learned that not to be afraid to speak up. I've also learned that people appreciate it. I think the physicians and the professionals, I made a point of showing them a lot of respect and appreciation for their being there. I think that it's a mutual relationship between me and the professional. And so I think that that's part of it. And then after that, I also think that it's really important to be able to ask questions. And I would bring someone along with me to write down notes if I needed, some support. How should parents speak up? Again, I think not being afraid to ask questions if you don't understand. The barriers, I think, are when people feel intimidated, and I think that's a really big piece to it, especially if they feel they don't have the educational background, or they don't know where to go for resources. And one of the things that I did as a parent mentor before COVID would be to sit in the playroom of my hospital where my son was treated and find out from parents, how they're doing, what questions they have. And sometimes I would turn on the computer and just show moms who don't have computers at home, how to access information, because they would feel so uncomfortable questioning the doctor's decision. And that is a big issue for me personally, to see people that aren't comfortable asking for help. So there are people and places out there that are willing to help people, but not everyone knows how to do that. And that's kind of my mini mission, and why I do what I do on a one-on-one basis.
Thank you so much. And I can say, as a physician, I love to have exchanges with my families. If they have questions, I'm happy to answer them, or say, That's a good question. Let me get back to you on that. So I love a very informed patient and patient family. So thank you for sharing that. Susan, can you talk about the importance, one, of using your voice, and then some of the barriers that you've seen as a mother, and just kind of course, as a caregiver, but have you seen in using your voice?
Well, I think the importance of it, as Angie touched on, is the fact that, you know, you have to be able to advocate for yourself. In our case as parents, I know for me, having an oppositional teenager was a little bit like rolling a boulder uphill. There was a lot of eye rolling and non-compliance. But at the end of the day, you know, my daughter was going to you know, take this journey the way she wanted. She was going to take it, and she was going to do what she was able to do, and she made that very clear, you know, to all of us. But at the same time, I think that, and my daughter wanted to be a surgeon, by the way, so I think she had a reverence for the medical profession. Her grandfather's a surgeon, and you know, she wanted to ask a lot of questions. She wanted to film things. She wanted to, you know, she had a lot of curiosity around it, and she earned a lot of respect from her medical team for being so knowledgeable in her own right. But at the same time, I think that and I don't know if it was just, and Angie might be able to speak to this too, but just a function of her age and just sort of accepting that, you know, this is, you know, whatever the doctor says is, you know, absolute gospel, no questions, don't, you know, and I think I challenged her on that. And then I challenged the doctors as well, because knowing how busy they are, how well-intentioned, but very busy, all of these physicians are, it's just not possible for them to have all of the information that you as a parent or an advocate or a patient would be diving in on your own. You know, the sheer number of clinical trials, the sheer number of, you know, off-label therapeutics or right to try or expanded access, you know, possibilities. I mean, all of these things, you know, other therapeutics that are being used in other parts of the world. I mean, of course, again, as a parent, there's nothing you wouldn't do to save your child. So, you know, you're looking at every possible option. And, you know, I was very fortunate that our care team was open to, you know, that feedback. But at the same time, you know, we heard things like, well, the good news is cancer doesn't hurt. Or, you know, getting a scan back and not being a radiologist, but seeing things that were alarming to me as a layperson, and, you know, hearing, nope, the scan looks good. You know, and then you just have to challenge yourself to say, no, that doesn't sound right. Let's dig a little bit deeper. And I think that's the challenge, and that's the hurdle, is to be able to overcome that and be, you know, fierce enough to say, you know, explain to me why you think that looks good or sounds good. Or, because as a parent, I'm not a radiologist, I'm not trained, but you know, there are certain things that, you know, in your gut, just, you know, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't, and maybe part of it's a function of just wanting to be gentle and not wanting to, you know, have, you know, deal a heavy blow to a family or a patient. But at the end of the day, what my daughter would always say was, I wish they would just tell me if there is nothing more they could do. I would much rather be on a beach somewhere than, you know, hooked up to chemo or whatever. I mean, she just had a different mindset about what she wanted to do with her time. And so I think from a voice standpoint, I think it's really important to be able to stand up and say that, you know, what your priorities are and make that known.
Thank you so much, Susan. You hit the nail on the head. You and Angie, as mothers, caregivers, seeing it all, knowing it all, being able to advocate for your own family as well as for others' families. So that was going to be my next question. And somebody actually touched base with that in the chat, just talking about being a palliative care social worker. So palliative care is so powerful in the context of, people think of palliative care as kind of death and dying, and this is the group that swoops in towards the end. But really, a good quality of life team / palliative care team swoops in the very beginning and has conversations around what should be done, what would you like, what is of utmost importance. Of course, I'm not a palliative care quality of life expert, but I know the importance and value the importance of that. So in that same context, when we think about using your voice, I think that the quality of life team, palliative care team is very important, instrumental for patients to feel confident about using their voice. And for example, one of the questions we asked my mother with this new diagnosis is that I said, it was a conversation between herself, myself, and my sister. And we said, well, what is of utmost importance to you before you start this treatment, these treatments? And she said, I really want to be able to have energy. I think that's most important because, you know, cancer treatments can be really debilitating. And so throughout this process where her energy has been low, because that's what our therapy, in the most recent appointment she's had with her oncologist, she says that this therapy that you have me on, I'm sure it's doing what it needs to do, but I am lethargic. And so I encouraged her to ask and speak about that with her physician. And he said, well, we'll go down a little bit on the dose, and that really should help to make a difference. So just her knowing and us having had that conversation of energy being of utmost importance to her, regardless of nausea and diarrhea and all those other things that of course can be treated with various medications, energy is so important. So just starting out with Angie, can you talk about kind of what tools would be most helpful? And I used just the example of quality of life team, but what kind of tools or resources are optimal for patients to know and how to optimally use their voice?
I think that the optimal way to use your voice is to use your voice. I know that sounds silly. I think that asking questions, taking notes, not being afraid, like Susan was talking about, you know, what her daughter wanted or what your mother wanted versus what everyone else thinks the person wants. I think giving as much information up front to the person and the family, and then repeating that information throughout the treatment process of what's available, what resources are out there, what does palliative care mean? I remember that being offered to my son after some responses, you know, some graft versus host disease issues that my son had. And, you know, a light went off in my head. I thought something was wrong, you know, something more serious. I thought something like his life was going to end soon. And they clarified for me, no, we're talking about pain management. We're talking about stress reduction. I think people need to know that there are more resources available to them than perhaps what is being initially offered to them. You know, complementary medicine is a resource that many people don't know about as a way of making the hospital stays more palatable, for lack of a better word. So using your voice, getting to the resources. Also, you know, when you're collecting information and you're going online, and I'm sure all of you know this because you're all professionals, make sure you go to the right resources. Make sure you go to the National Cancer Institute or to the Lymphoma Society, all of your advocacy organizations that are legitimate organizations that provide resources to you. You know, talk to your social worker if you need mental health services. Let your nurses know that you need something. Don't be afraid to ask. If you're feeling overwhelmed, let them know that you're feeling overwhelmed. And, you know, it's really important to not assume that just because you're in the hospital and you have tubes in your body, that this is the only thing that can be happening. You need to know that you can say, I want to do something else. I need to do something else. You know, it's okay. And as a mother, from the time my son was first diagnosed at 15, when I was his legal, you know, guardian, whereas when he became 19, then he was able to express himself. One of the things I learned from my son after he had an allergic reaction to his methotrexate, which was one of his main chemotherapies, was that I would not question his concern. Okay. And I told his resident that my son was having an allergic reaction to his methotrexate. And the next thing you know, his entire face blew up and he couldn't breathe. And they at first poo-pooed this. Okay. Oh, he's just exaggerating. His lip is getting swollen. And I looked at the resident and I said, I will never question my son again. If he doesn't think he's feeling well, then he doesn't feel well. Just because he's 15 doesn't mean he's exaggerating, So I guess what I'm saying is, don't be afraid. If something's not right, tell someone, because each one of us, we are all unique. Everyone who's going through treatment is going to have a different effect. We don't know how the treatment is going to help you. So people need to know that just because it might have helped one person, it may not help you the same way. So all of these little tidbits, it's knowing that you're unique and special is enough of a reason to question what's going on.
So nicely said, Angie. Thank you so much. Tricia, can you talk about what tools and resources you recommend for people to be able to optimally use their voice?
Yes, I think to echo what Angie already mentioned and said so eloquently, I think really asking questions is key. And so LLS has a lot of resources. We have a series about communicating around your healthcare needs, and that includes everything from initial diagnosis all the way through survivorship. And so these fact sheets include series of questions that you can ask and note cards where you can write down the answers to what's been said, so that you can, if you're not sure what questions to ask, we can help guide you on what questions to ask. So I think finding resources, as Angie said, from reputable organizations that provide that kind of guidance, because cancer is overwhelming and all the information is overwhelming, and sometimes it's hard, and chemo brain is real. And so sometimes it's really hard to think of putting words into a complete sentence, not even thinking about asking higher level questions about how to guide your own care and use your voice in your care. So I think those kinds of resources are key. I think having a buddy, an advocate, a family member, a caregiver, a friend, somebody who can be there with you to help you understand what was said if it wasn't clear, to have it be echoed back to you following if you forget it. All of those things can be incredibly helpful. But I think asking questions and finding those tools to ask those questions if you don't have it off the top of your head or you're fearful, to make sure that you have support in asking those questions and stating your care. I think it's really key to, that Angie said that she believed her son's discomfort without questioning it. That kind of unconditional understanding is so important, because only the patient knows the patient's experience fully. No one else can know it as fully as they can. And so for the patient to be able to say clearly, this is my experience today. And it changes every day for patients. Some days are great days, some days are the worst days ever. And so it's important to be able to voice those.
Thank you so much, Tricia. Can you, I'll start with Minas and then go to Susan. Can you talk about maybe some common misconceptions we sometimes as patients will think about around using our voice? For example, I feel like I'm a moderator, but I'm also a panelist too. Like, I'm giving my own experiences. So I'm just gonna say I'm one of the panelists as well. But I feel like some of the misconceptions in speaking with family and speaking with friends is that I'm not allowed to fire my doctor. I'm not allowed to question him or her or around the treatment options. And as an oncologist and as a cancer survivor and as a caregiver, I totally know that that's not true. And I know that with insurance, and even if you don't have insurance, you are the one that are dictating the payment for this physician or for this care team. And so I have in multiple instances, not only encouraged a second or a third opinion, but also in the context of my mom, even recently, I said, this oncologist isn't the best oncologist for you. This oncologist has missed this, and has missed this. If I were the patient, knowing what I know, I would walk away. It took a little time for her to realize that and experience for her own. I said it earlier, and then she had to experience what she needed to go through. And she eventually walked away. So that was a little bit of misconception on her part, because she was just like, I can't fire her. She's been good to me. Like, I was like, she missed this, she missed that. I diagnosed you with thrush. That's not okay. Like, I can diagnose you with thrush, but that's not okay. And then so just in thinking about misconceptions around using your voice, that was one. And then the other that I think about is I have to have an old doctor, old in age that is, in order for he or she to be able to give the best guidance. And so that's another thing that I've counseled families about. You don't need to get the person who's been in the oncology field for 50 plus years, because sometimes young physician scientists, oncologists like myself are more up on what the blog posts are more up on what patient care families have been talking about abroad, nationally, and around what is coming out currently in terms of clinical trials. And so we may have a better pulse on things than somebody who's been in it for 50 plus years. So not to say any ageism, but those are just two misconceptions around oncology care and just using your voice that I have either personally experienced or kind of tangentially experienced. So just starting with Minas, what are maybe one or two misconceptions around using your voice that you could speak about today?
Well, it's interesting. This actually came up in, I created the Breast Advocate app, which is a shared decision-making app for breast cancer patients and anyone at high risk. And in the community, just yesterday, someone posted a question. They literally asked, do I have options? And so, and this individual is, she's not the only one who feels that way. So I mean, here we are talking about, you understand that, your physician's livelihood is dependent on you being happy. But I mean, I think we've got to step way back and get people to realize that this is a relationship, or it should be a relationship like any other. If there's an issue, you have to bring it up. Doc, I got to tell you, with all due respect, I know you're great. I know you're really busy. I know you're super smart, but I kind of feel like, we started off on the wrong foot, or I kind of feel like maybe was this missed, or, those questions are okay. Right. So people need to be okay with that kind of discussion. Right. And then another thing people find scary when we say, in my experience, when you say to someone, use your voice, it's like anytime you give someone instructions or you have an idea, people may love the idea, but they don't actually know how to go about seeing it through, right? So, I mean, I'm president of my group. I have 35 employees. We have conversations all the time. We have ideas. We brainstorm. Okay, you got this. I got this. Okay. And then a week later, nothing's happened because they don't know how to follow through. They don't know how to do it. And so when it comes to patient advocacy, your voice, shared decision-making, patients need to realize that they actually define their own terms, right? So you mentioned ageism. You have doctors who have come through their training many years ago, at which time care delivery was very paternalistic. Here's what we're going to do for you, Miss Jones. Oh, okay, doc, you know best. Okay, that's not the way anymore. So it is, I agree with you, it is maybe the younger folks, if you had to pick. Now, it's not age dependent, it's mentality dependent. But pick the style. Because picking based on age will get you in trouble. So pick the style. Talk to other patients. What's their experience been with that physician team, with that care team? And you define how much autonomy you want to have, okay? And if you're completely overwhelmed as a patient that day and you're like, you know what, I can't make a decision today. You know what, doc, today, I need for you to tell me what you would do for your wife. That's where I am today. That's okay. You don't have to make a decision, but you are making the decision that you want the recommendation made for you. See, so the autonomy is still in your hands. So for me, that's a really crucial point.
Yeah, you made a really good point to say, is this the therapy you'd recommend for your family? And I've had patients to ask me that, as well as I've heard my own family and friends ask, would you give this to your daughter? Would you give this to your son? So yes, that is spot on. And Susan, can you talk to us maybe around some misconceptions that you've heard or experienced around using your voice?
Sure. So I think one of the things, and I think Minas touched on this a little bit, is just this idea that, you know, you're the only one going through this or has ever gone through this, you know, and cancer is already very isolating. Psychosocially, it's isolating, and, you know, emotionally, it's isolating. So it's just one of those things where I think people tend to feel like they're very much alone in their cancer or their, you know, whatever they're dealing with. But I think to put a plug in for Collintown a little bit, finding your people, right? Finding the community of people, and I'm sure Tricia can speak to this as well, but where everyone has had the experience in one way, shape, or form. And, you know, no matter how specific, you know, whether it's a, you know, specific mutation or a specific, you know, question about a surgery or a specific surgeon or what have you, there's someone in that community that can say, raise their hand and say, you know, I've experienced that, and, you know, don't accept, you know, this answer, you know, you need to look at it, getting a second opinion, or you might want to think about talking to another surgeon, or you might want to think about changing your care team, or, you know, those kinds of things. Like you mentioned, it's okay to fire your doctor if you don't feel that your interests are aligned, or if you feel like there's something that's being missed. And I think, and to another point Minas made, you know, this sort of a little bit of a paternalistic, you know, historic perspective on standard of care, and that things just, you know, tend to follow this very prescriptive thing. But every patient is absolutely individual in their own journey, and they have to be able to overcome, you know, those barriers. But I think the misconception that I would point to first and foremost is that you're not alone, right? That there are lots and lots of other people in the world who have maybe gone through what you've gone through. And so taking those two things together, yes, it's a very individual experience, but there are other people who can help, and bringing those two things together to get the information that you need will help empower patients and caregivers and to use their voice.
Any other panelists want to speak on? Thank you so much, Susan. Speak on tools or resources and kind of misconceptions around using your voice.
I just want to touch on some stuff that's been coming up in the chat, which I think is really important, and that is experiences of African-American or minority patients and caregivers, and either not having the respect to have their voice heard, or not feeling comfortable raising their voice because of access to care issues, institutionalized racism, all of those things that create barriers for our minority patients and patients of color. And so I just wanted to touch on that as a true challenge and recognize that. I know a group of patients in our community, advocated for creating a BIPOC group where they can talk about some of those challenges on our online community, Black, Indigenous, and people of color group. And so it is a true challenge, and one that is a huge obstacle to overcome, and something we need to do because all of our patients need equity and access to the best possible healthcare, and to be able to utilize their voice in accessing and utilizing that healthcare. So I just wanted to recognize some of those challenges that were being discussed.
Thank you so much.
And
Go ahead.
I'd like to add a couple things as well. Yeah, what's really nice in the AYA world is that we're seeing more organizations focusing on the needs of people who have experienced, racism, discrimination during treatment because of their skin color. And that is a really frustrating and something that I personally have not experienced, and yet am hearing about it a lot. And so I know of organizations that are out there working very hard to help their own communities, and then reaching out to predominantly white communities and working together to educate people. So as a voice, we all are responsible for making sure that racism doesn't exist in the medical community. One more thing, if I may add, is that the voice of the patient and the caregiver doesn't end when treatment ends. And I think patients need to be educated that if you have a problem, you have every right in the world to go back and say, I don't feel good, I'm sick, I'm tired, I hurt. And people often are afraid to do that. Many programs, hospitals offer survivorship clinics, but not everyone does. And also just the general population of people, they don't know that when a person is done with treatment, that they're going to be fine. We don't know that. And I think patients need to know that it's okay to let people know that you don't feel well and that you need help, whether it's emotionally or physically. And usually it's both. So find your own group. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry. I'd like to add, since we're talking about resources and disparities, I think, what GRIT is doing and other online advocacy groups, online support groups, there are several out there, health condition specific, and also, general, like GRIT. I think their role here and the potential really cannot be overstated in terms of importance and opportunity, because at the heart, really, one of the core issues of disparities is literacy, health literacy. And so, and then when you look at support, irrespective of how much support you have at home from loved ones, if you're lucky enough to have that, you can never truly get the same level of support as someone who has been in your shoes before, taken the same road, trod the same path, someone with true experience of what it is that you are talking about. And so online support groups, the reputable ones, have an opportunity here to really help bridge the gap in education, support, health literacy, to help really decrease the disparities whilst helping everyone. I will say, be careful, because not all online groups are reputable. Lurk before you speak. It's okay to lurk, okay? Get a feel, there's no rush. Get the sense, get the lay of the land, get the pulse, get the aura. How does it feel being in that group? Some of them can be very tribal and may not be your cup of tea. So lurking is absolutely okay. But if you find a good one that suits you, it can be really, really very, very helpful.
And in just a few minutes that we have left here, I'm just going to ask for your last kind of words around people sharing their stories. So we kind of talked mostly about using your voice in the medical community just to mainly speak with the physician and the care team and get the best care. We spoke a little bit on blog posts and just kind of using your community and the resources of the community. But just in terms of last minute statements around, what do you guys have to say about, one, using your voice and telling your story and how important that is for yourself and for others? So we'll start with Susan.
Okay, thanks. So I guess my final words on that would be that, you know, and I would tell people, even if I just helped one person, right? Even if one person was the only person that, you know, I was able to touch, it would be worth it to tell Jessica's story, to share our journey, to use our voice to do that. And so I think I think that's really the most important thing in terms of my feeling about it. And my takeaway is that, you know, even though I'm out there trying to talk to other groups and even parents who have lost children, you know, as Angie touched on, when that journey ends, not just treatment, but, you know, sort of the caregiving journey, being able to help others who have been in that situation, even beyond that. So from a grief and loss perspective as well. So, you know, I see the voice piece of it going from, you know, caregiving to peer-to-peer support, patient advocacy, and helping others that maybe need help finding their voice, or maybe just need someone to help, you know, them figure out what kinds of questions they need to ask, and then taking it even further for other parents who have been in situation like mine. So just, I would say that continuum of using your voice, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is that it really doesn't end. There are lots of different ways that you can continue to use your voice, even you know, after someone might think, oh, you know, you've had this experience, but no, the experience is a continuum. So that's what I would say.
And Tricia?
I think that for me personally, there was nothing more both healing and empowering in being able to tell my story. I really stunk at it when I first started. Wasn't good at telling my story. I'd break down crying, which, you know, now I can say told me that I still had more healing from my experience to do. I think that for me, it was being able to serve as an honored hero for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, to be able to share my stories with others, so that they knew they weren't alone. I think Susan mentioned earlier, even if you have a common diagnosis, you still feel like you're the only person in the world going through this when you get diagnosed. And then there's nothing more relieving than finding your people, those people that connect with you because their experiences have been similar to yours. And so using your voice can help you make those connections. Using your voice can help you heal through your own experiences. And using your voice can help other people feel they're not alone, and maybe empower them to utilize their voice in their own cancer journey for whatever purpose. And the only thing additional thing I'd point out is there's no rules about it. Your story is your own. It doesn't have to sound like anybody else's. It doesn't have to be packaged with a pretty bow. It's your story. So you can share however you feel most comfortable, how much you feel most comfortable, and with whom you feel most comfortable.
Christian, can Angie and Minas share? Or at least Angie? Okay, we're not getting in trouble. Go ahead, Angie.
Okay, so if I were to give you one message about voice, your voice can be through your speaking, writing, art, whatever medium you feel most comfortable in. So use your voice in any way, shape, or form that you want to. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. And you have the yoga practice, so then that is the way for using. Absolutely. Minas? Uh-oh, you're muted, Minas.
One sentence, because it's 2:00. If you're not being heard, you're talking to the wrong people. That's all I got.
Very nicely stated. Very succinct, just like surgeons.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining this session about using your voice, how to use your voice. I've learned so much. It's been healing as well for me to be able to share. And I just thank all my panelists, and I thank Grit for being here and to have this opportunity. So thank you so much.